Please stop talking. Josh, what's up, brother? I think you've been like one of the first ones in before, Josh. I know, I was on time this time. I remember. I know, I'm trying. It's so good. I'm happy that you're here as well, Laura. Let's see if we can get D in here pretty soon. Thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. Oh, D just texted me. Let's see. D just texted me, so he should be in here momentarily. Laura, I'm glad that you joined. Let's see. There we go. Should be able to come on. My brother.
Hey, what up?
How you doing, man?
I'm good. You know, I've never done one of these though.
Well, welcome. I'm glad this could be the first. I'm also glad that we almost messed up the time. I'm glad that you finished our practice early today.
Yeah, I looked at the post. I was like, oh snap, it's 7 Eastern, so that's I'm still like an hour behind, but we're all good.
I'm glad you made it. Well, thank you again for joining. This feels a little different this time, considering I've talked to you like 3 times this week. It's not like we need to catch up, but I'm gonna quickly introduce sort of what we're doing here, and then we'll jump into it.
Okay.
So this is Life in the Gray. Thank you, everybody that's joined already. Hopefully, a few more will trickle in. This is connected to my book, Gray Boy, which comes out September 15th and is on pre-order right now, and is all about growing up Black and white spaces. And today I have Daryl, who will introduce himself. But Daryl's like a brother to me, and we grew up together. And now is a cornerback for the Dallas Cowboys. Or are you a safety for the Dallas Cowboys?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm a little bit of everything
Daryl's a
at this
Dallas
point.
for the
I can't even put a title on it.
Okay.
I'm just a Dallas Cowboy.
There you go. He's a Dallas Cowboy. So D, before we jump in, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Daryl Worley, originally from Philly. Went to West Virginia University. Left West Virginia. Been a football player ever since. Just kind of been moving forward. NFL life has been blessed. I mean, I'm honored to be able to be a part of this great job opportunity and everything that's been going on. Going on my 5th year here, so you know, it
Cool.
is what it is.
So there's a few things I want to talk about. I obviously want to talk about your current role as an NFL player, but you also have a current role as a father to 2 young children. And I want to hear about sort of fatherhood, both in the times of Corona, but also with all this going on in the world. But where I want to start is sort of what we have in common, which is growing up together at Penn Charter, and some of those early years. I think you're the second person now that I've interviewed that is actually in the book. You're mentioned in the book, as you know. I sent it to you.
Yep.
So I want to talk a bit about that as well. So to start, we sort of met each other and became close in high school at Penn Charter. But could you give a bit of context of sort of life for you before Penn Charter, growing up in North Philly, and just tell a bit of your story?
I mean, my story starts, rough. I was born in North Philly. I was fortunate enough to have both of my parents growing up. I have an older brother and an older sister. So, but they're 18 years older than me, so they were out of the house. So I was kind of raised as the only child within my household. In the heart of North Philly, I grew up by Temple Hospital, and my family did what it could, to keep food on the table, be able to grant all of the wishes that I had. Sports was kind of like that outlet to kind of keep me out of trouble, and I mean, a lot of athletes kind of have that same story. But honestly, sports it was exactly what brought me to this point in my life. sports was actually the pivotal and key point to being able to make it into Penn Charter, being able to go there on a they don't like to call it scholarships, but I was there on an athletic scholarship, to say the least. It was able to get a real good journey and a better education than what I would have gone to a neighborhood high school, locally that a lot of people go to. And when you go to those type of high schools, you don't really get the, I mean, from the education, the connections, the friendships that I've made, that take you a lifetime. It just doesn't happen that way. You're in a different circumstance, a different environment,
Yeah.
where things just don't pan out the same, to say the least.
Right. So I wasn't there when you came to Penn Charter, and for those that don't know, Penn Charter is sort of like a prestigious prep school in Philly, and you came to Penn Charter before I did, so I wasn't there to see sort of your transition into that. Can you talk to me about what it was like to go from North Philly and, as you said, sort of a rough upbringing to Penn Charter, which would have been, I imagine, a very different sort of environment for you?
For me personally, I felt like the transition is it's real fear. I mean, you're used to going to schools where the minorities are abundant, especially at public schools and the schools that are in those type of Philadelphia neighborhoods. So I mean, it was definitely, I would say, fearful at first, just walking into that majority white schools like that. And I mean, it's private, the opportunities you're facing, but I know educationally, I was like I was a solid student when it came to public schools. I mean, I was honor roll, that I didn't really have to try much to be able to succeed at those type of schools. But
Right.
going into Penn Charter, I actually had a really tough time transitioning educationally and
Yeah.
academically. It was hard. Like it was I remember a point during my freshman year, like I was thinking about transferring out just because, I mean, sports were fine. I mean, that was what it was, but it just
Right.
academically, I wasn't living up to everything that they expected, and it was really hurting me mentally. I went through a challenge.
So it's interesting to hear you say that, and because you read the part about the book that you're in, it's like I never saw that because uh, Daryl was like you were like the guy at Penn Charter,
Yeah.
particularly because of athletics. I mean, in all of Philly, really, you were one of the best athletes in the city, and I think that you had this persona of just sort of calm, cool, and collected, and really knew who you were, even early on. So it's interesting to hear you say that. Can you tell me a bit more about that, about how you were able to sort of make it seem externally that that was not the case, that you were struggling
Uh,
with that adjustment?
Really, I think it kind of came with it all, and like you said, exactly what the book is not being exactly comfortable in your environment.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what it was, from being around people that were not likewise as far as skin color.
yeah,
Honestly, it was just really just being able to I wouldn't say I was putting on a persona, but I was still being me while not letting things affect me outside. And I think that's more so, it speaks to the genre of a man, and just how we are as men. Like you try not to let your weaknesses show. And I feel like for the most part, that's kind of what I was doing, even though I may have been struggling with things at home, or when you're going to those type of private schools and things like that, those people, they come from money. They have a lot more things going on for them, especially guys have very nice cars when going into high school. From going over friends' houses, everyone's, I just naturally didn't come from that. So just knowing who I was and staying true to who I was, I mean, I made great friends, and really just never changed on who I was.
And what was the transition like when you would go back home? Because as we've been talking about, those environments were very different, and we've been talking about
Hmm.
sort of the struggle to adjust in the environment that was Penn Charter. But did new challenges come when you would go back home and go back into that neighborhood,
Not
having Penn
I
Charter?
wouldn't say that it was new challenges. Like I said, I mean, I was always being me, so there wasn't like I was putting like, oh, I have to be me. I have to be this person when I'm in this environment. I have to be this person when I'm in that environment. I
Right.
mean, anyone that met me during those private school days, they know that I was the same guy. I mean, you whether you caught me in my neighborhood or you caught me in a rich white neighborhood, I was going to always be the same guy, carry myself the same way. And I mean, you try not to. You try. I mean, I feel like jealousy is a weak-minded emotion, and I feel like it. Not to say it's a woman's emotion, but it's also it's not something. It's not a trait that a man should inhibit. So I just felt like honestly, I was thankful more than anything. You know, being able to go back to my neighborhood, telling them, "Oh, my friend at school, he had this, and this." Like, you know, it was kind of motivational for me more than anything. You know, just to see what real families have grown up and accomplished and what they were passing on to their kids.
So can you tell me about sort of the role that athletics played? You talked about how it gave you all sorts of new opportunities. Obviously, it's sort of what you do now. But when you were in that environment at Penn Charter, uh, was I guess my question is was athletics a positive or was it a totally positive influence? And what I mean by that is, did you ever feel as though it was you were so the athlete? Did you ever feel as though people viewed you differently, didn't embrace sort of all of the different things you were because of that?
I would say for sure. Um, and there used to be like a little joke, you know, between our friend group where um, Dr. Bonnie, where he was just like he would always call me like his horse or something. It was like a weird nickname, and it was like, and it was because it was like, you know, every joke is kind of there's some truth behind it. So I always looked at it like he truly looked at me like that, even though everything that he did for me, I truly appreciated it, and he helped me to take another step as far as my life. But I definitely felt as though I was viewed as kind of that I was there for sports, so there should be no complaints when it comes to doing anything sports wise. So I mean, it was kind of sideways, but at the same time, I mean, I couldn't really complain because I couldn't turn around and say no, I don't want to do this because there was no way my parents were coming out of their pockets to be able to pay for education like that.
Right. Right. So I want to transition a bit to talk about my nephew and my niece.
Yeah.
Uh, because you're the first of us to be a father, and you have two beautiful children. What has parenting been like to two young children in the time of Corona? How's the past?
Um, in the time of Corona, I would say that it was like a battlefield, especially those first 2 months. It was tough, but um, I feel like parenting is as tough as you make it, you know, especially when you're raising a child with someone. I feel like it as long as you guys are working together, because every day there's going to be something new that a kid does. So as long as you guys are working together and doing it together and be able to help each other hand in hand, be able to take those steps, you know, because there's not going to be a day where one parent is feeling excellent every single day, you know. So just being able to have that hand in hand help, because those, I mean, the kids they don't know any better, and while at the same time that they don't want to do anything but love you. So it's definitely a bright spot in a parent's day.
So Caden, so you have two kids. Caden is the oldest, and then you have a daughter, Carson. And
Yep.
um, Caden, is Caden old enough at this point to start asking questions? Like particularly, for instance, I'm thinking of the fact that Chadwick Boseman just passed. Uh, is Caden old enough to be a Black Panther fan yet?
Uh, Not necessarily. So he knows what he likes. He's more on Spider-Man right now, but he's not in that talking phase of where he's talking and asking questions to even know what truly went on with that. But you know, when the time comes, I feel like those are necessary conversations that have to happen as far as you know, because he's gonna one day watch Black Panther, and I mean he's into cartoons and things like that. So it's definitely it's going to be an interesting conversation to be able to sit him down and explain to him exactly what went on and how he was as a man. I mean, from the lens and what we see.
How do you think about that? I mean, so I was wondering that I figured that Caden was probably a bit too young to start having those conversations now, but particularly with all that's happened this summer, with police violence and all of the sort of the hard conversations uh, that people are going to have, particularly with young black boys. How do you, Caden thankfully is too young to understand much of that now, but he won't be for long. How do you think about some of those conversations that you're going to have?
Um, I just feel like you can't really be biased about it or anything. I feel like within even outside of that of having that specific conversation, I feel like you always have to be honest with your children and show them the morals and the ways in which that you do things. And as long as you're doing that, I mean, everything should turn out the correct way. I mean, that's the way that my dad raised me. There wasn't really a stipulation on how we should view certain people or how things is. I mean, you just have to grow up with morals and ethics that are the right way of doing things, and that's with everyday life. You should be doing the right thing, and yeah, I'm still learning it that there's things that I do on an everyday basis that my kids see that you don't even realize that they're watching, but they'll replicate what you were doing. And I mean, some things are fun, and some things are good, some things are bad. But at the end of the day, as long as you're doing more good than right and instilling that in them, everything should be very good.
We talked a moment ago about sort of the neighborhood you grew up in North Philly, and that was a certain way of life. And obviously now, you've worked hard and gotten out of that, and you're able to provide much more for your children than would have been provided for you. Is there a tension of trying to expose your children to that neighborhood and that way of life that you would have known growing up?
Um, for sure. I mean that the one thing that I always said, being a parent, is that I would never hide where I come from my kids. And that was one of the reasons why when we did have kids, we didn't want to stay too far from where their grandparents lived. I mean, for them to be able to see those places, because no matter how quote unquote bad we want to call those neighborhoods, those are the neighborhoods that have, I mean, they have blossomed some of the most brilliant and beautiful people. So we can't really hide that from them. We want them to understand of where we come from as parents, how we were raised, how things are, and it doesn't make you better than the people in that neighborhood just because you're not growing up within it, but more so on the fact of your parents worked to try to give you a better life. So and they should have the same mentality when they're growing up into creating their own wonderful children.
And you, yeah, that was actually kind of leads into what was going to be my next question is how you think about the choices you're going to make in terms of where you send both of your children to school. Because you've seen two very different school environments, and we just talked about some of the tensions that you felt in each. Um, how, given that you know what a private school, sort of a predominantly white environment, looks like, how do you think about whether or not that's a positive influence for your children?
Um, I wouldn't say that it's a negative influence, but I kind of always had the mindset of I would send my kids to public school until high school.
Okay.
Even though with the circumstances of being able to afford private school at this point in my life and things like that, it's just I would want my kids to see just kind of the blatant and upfront
Yeah.
of how life really is, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
it's not so much that they have the experience that I had, because I mean, I could also change my mind and say, oh yeah, they could go to private school, but I just want them to have that kind of realistic view on life, not kind of. I feel like when it's like I can't even say when it's mainly private school living that you're not necessarily seeing all angles of life, but it's kind of I feel like it's kind of shaded compared to having to grow up in a different environment.
So one of the things, and I don't think I've shared this part of the book with you, but one of the things I talk about is, and we've had these conversations just about sort of the mental health challenges that came with some of those early years. And you mentioned earlier, feeling as though we need to not let a lot of that show. And I think that even for you, even for people that are close to me, there's one chapter in particular that I think will be surprising in terms of just how difficult things got at times when we were younger. Um, you have had a lot of pressures over the last 5 years in the league. It has not always been a straight line, and plus family plus kids. I mean, it's been difficult at times. Can you talk to me about your sort of mental health journey and how you've stayed sane through all of this?
Um, I mean, I'm naturally a guy that's, I'm not too radical about this or that, as far as what's going on in the world. Like, I mean, it may sound ignorant or asinine when I say it, but I'm not a guy that watches the news just simply because the news is always something bad, you know? So I'm always more of in the headspace of I learn what's important, but at the same time, I like to I keep to myself. Me and my wife, we talk a lot, and we have those conversations. Like when everything that was all the craziness and stuff was going on in the world, and it's kind of like you kind of straddle the line on like how do you feel about certain things, and in certain circumstances, you do feel radical. I mean, it brings that anger into you and all of those types of things. But I'm more of I like to think more than I react. And I feel like that's another thing that I learned from my neighborhood. You see guys make life changing decisions just off of impulse and reacting from things that they of what's going on around them, or something that may have happened. So, I mean, you just learn to, not risk everything that you've worked for just simply off of impulse.
Right, right. And then the another thing that I want to talk about before we get out of here is, and I don't know how you could avoid this conversation, is just all that's happening in the NFL with the Black Lives Matter movement that you've been witness to over your last 5 years. So you got there. Correct me if I'm wrong. You would have gotten there right before Kaepernick first knelt, right?
Yeah, I was drafted the year that he did it. So
Okay.
that was my first year.
So you've seen sort of the transformation, and what I find interesting is that the NFL was either keeping this at arm's length or trying to put it down. When this first started, and Kaepernick has been ostracized, and it seems they've changed their tune a bit. Um, what do you think of sort of how this? What's the best way to ask? Just sort of how this has gone, the change that you've seen in the NFL and its dealings with the Black Lives Matter over the course of the last 5 years or so.
Um, I'm I'm not too sure of like how or there's never a perfect answer as to how or why things are handled in such a way that they are. Um, I feel like there's kind of also that aspect of the why are things so big in the news now that they weren't, because I feel like things like this have been going on. I feel like we should have been fighting for this type of change, and to have this police brutality and everything else that's going on to bring to a halt. I feel like going back to when we were in high school, actually, I remember being like affected by what happened to Trayvon Martin. Feeling like that could have been any one of the. I mean, I know me personally, I only had about 10 to 15 African American kids in my class, so that could have been any of us. So sitting in classrooms speaking about things like that, it's like these things have been going on. It's just I'm happy now to see that things are moving in the right path now,
Yeah.
even though they may not have before.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that you're one of 10 to 15 African Americans in the class, and actually, I want to go back to that, even though we've moved on from Penn Charter, because I think that that's important. I thought there's a whole chapter called the Black Table. I don't know if you know that. There's a whole chapter called the Black Table in the book, and I talk about the Black Table a lot. Can you briefly describe what that was and sort of why it was important in our lives when we were coming up?
I just feel like it's a natural thing. I mean, you gravitate towards people, likewise people,
Yeah.
no matter what you are, especially when it comes to culture, people are going to gravitate towards what feels natural to them. And I feel like that's what the Black Table was for us. Like a lot of us grew up in a lot of different circumstances. Like taking you, for instance, just going to private school your entire life, it didn't matter that I came from a public school or coming from a rough neighborhood. Yeah, you gravitate towards people that are likewise in your culture, and that table was more of a culture and more of a common stomping ground for all of us. I felt like, it was a break away from because everyone didn't necessarily have to be like us, where they were able to just hold their emotions back. That place could have been that table could have been a place of sanity for people,
Right.
where they could just take their mask off. It didn't have to basically put on a two face to show for the others that may have been around. So that
Yeah.
30 to 45 minutes that we had each day, I mean, it was kind of comforting. I would say for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll send you the chapter where I talk about this, but the role that that played in my own life, like I can't overstate it. The fact that, as you mentioned, after having gone to private school my whole life, getting to Penn Charter and having that one area where kind of like everyone looked like me, just made a world of a difference in an environment where, like you said, I could have lost my sanity. I mean, really could have
Hmm.
gone crazy, not
Yeah, for
knowing
sure.
who I was. Um, so the last thing I want to talk about is that you're now a Dallas Cowboy. You've bounced around a bit. You were a Panther. You were a Raider. Now you're a Cowboy. Um, and you're there during this summer in the midst of, as we've already discussed, all of these things that are going on. And I saw that FC Dallas recently, like they kneeled for the anthem and people were booing them and throwing things at them. And I'm just wondering how you've played in the South before. You played in Carolina, but I'm wondering, is this conversation any different when you're in a southern city, having been from the Northeast? Do you think that there's how is this dealt? How is this handled with differently in Southern culture?
Um, I wouldn't say, me personally, I've had any different experiences from it. I mean, like I said before, I'm not like a super radical guy, so I'm not out walking, I'm not marching, I'm not doing things like that. Um, Most of the time, my thing comes from articulating to be able to help our people in the most effective way, and brilliant way. I mean, I can't say that marching isn't helping in the process. They aren't helping in any which way, but I don't personally have any experiences about stuff like that, just simply because I'm more of I'm more of a family first guy, I'm keeping my family first. I can't really I'm not a front line type of guy where I'm out there each and every day, standing with the picket signs and doing things like that. Do I still want to see change and things like that? At morals as a man, I will stand up. I will stand on my morals and my values more before anything. As a man, as a black man, as if I was green, purple, white, or yellow, you know what I'm saying. My morals will always come first, and I feel like morals as a man, I just try to lead with those, and just stand on top of it.
Well, D, I appreciate you. Uh, this was quick, but I appreciate you having this conversation, man. And it feels strange almost to catch up on camera, given the fact that I'll probably catch up with you right after this, anyways.
Yeah.
Uh, but I hope you have a blessed long weekend with the family, and please tell C and everybody I said hello.
No, I definitely will do. Hopefully I'll get one of those early copies,
Yes, I'll be sure to get an early copy, and I'll be sure to sign one for little baby Caden,
Yeah,
so
for
that
sure. Got to keep it. Keep it in
I
his
mean,
case.
he might be a little young for it now, but one day soon.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you
All right,
soon.
bro. Appreciate you.